Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another video of Indigenous Podcast. My name is Marcus Wanchaloa and our very special guest, Moore, today, who I'm going to introduce here in just a few seconds. Before we go on, I wanted to say we got to like 1,000, I think, and 5 subs or something. So we hit like the 1,000 mark. So I wanted to say thank you so much to everyone who is, given their time to comment, good or bad. um, because we wouldn't be here without you guys, because you guys are the motivation to want us to make us want to keep going and like making videos and content, um because you're all the reason like we're here. And of course, like we want to do what we can for our indigenous brothers and sisters as well. But again, like indigenous people, natives, um non-native people, thank you all so much. That being said, we are going to create a Discord link for those that really want to get into some serious convo for us. We'll be posting that in the channel here in a little bit later. But yeah, thank you so much. Juan Chilo, you want to add anything?
Just thank you guys again a lot. It means a lot to us. Getting to that 1,000 mark is the first stepping stone to possibly being a bigger channel. That's what we're hoping for in the future, to be able to lead and help people reconnect to their roots. So thank you again. We might do a giveaway as a reward, but let us get some cash in because your boys work full-time jobs.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. But yeah, again, thank you all so much. So we're going to start here. And we're special guest Moore. Want to give a little bit about yourself? Thank you for coming on, my fellow Peruvian friend.
Hello, everyone. I am Moore. My full name is Morley Adama. I'm really happy to be here because of Marcus. He invited me, and I have some ideas I want to show you guys and articulate for you guys. And I really appreciate that you guys are reaching out to all these people and getting all these subscribers. That is amazing. So I think this would be a really great place to share this information with all the native and honestly non-native people that want to see the video.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. So we're going to add something else.
No.
We're going to add that you had a book that you were writing on. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I have a book. I have one that is almost finished. It needs to be edited. It's at some point I'm going to release it. Oh, okay. Um, it's uh, it's in the process of being edited. So that will come out whenever God decides. And I'm working on other projects, and which actually is the reason why I may be here and what is this information that I want to share with you guys. Because a lot of this has inspired what I'm writing, what I'm thinking, what I imagine, uh, a lot of what I'm saying, uh, a lot of what I'm going to say here, and a lot of what I'm going to show you guys is inspiration to the writing that I do and the storytelling that I do. And I actually have an Instagram account, so anybody can follow me there. I think Marcus is going to add the link uh, in the description. So, and I also have a YouTube channel, and Marcus will also add that into the description.
Oh yeah, definitely. We'll put that in there. Yeah, you have your YouTube channel going over Peruvian, I think, government, the Constitution.
Yeah, when I started the channel, I wasn't quite sure what the direction would be. So I'm starting with the easiest thing, which is basically reading the Constitution. But eventually, the Peruvian Constitution, and eventually, what I'm going to be doing is, analyzing and seeing uh, critically what could be changed or what can we say or things like that about the Constitution, so that um, more people, especially in the native people in Peru, could feel like they are represented in the political system of Peru, which is a big talk in Peru. So anybody who is Peruvian will probably know a little bit about that.
Sounds good. So speaking of Peru, maybe we should get on with the history then.
For sure.
Yeah.
Um, before I do that, I do want to make a disclaimer before I get into the little bit of history that I want to talk about. My disclaimer is basically this, that my knowledge of Peru is very limited to my own investigation and my interest and passion to want to know. I want to say that I'm not a historian. I didn't even grow up in Peru. I came here when I was 10. So I think the positivity of this is that it allows me to be creative and construct my own view and what it means to be Peruvian. But at the same time, it can be a little bit negative, maybe even detrimental, since it may differ and even stray away from the everyday Peruvian perspective of who they are, especially of those who live and breathe the struggles of Peru. So there is a positive and negative there. I also actually want to say I'm not an authority to speak on behalf of the Peruvian population, nor did they elect me to represent them before the world. However, I want to say that undeniably, I am a descendant of a race of people who have been around the South American region for over 4,000 years or more. And the very real circumstance of having immigrated into the United States has led me to actually question sort of like my place in society and, a little bit with my identity here, having come from a different country. So thus I realized that I'm actually a descendant of a group of people who through history have become known as indigenous or native. However, I want to add that my arrival, my advent in history is not like those of our ancestors. Rather, it's in a period of time where we know that we are not only part of our immediate community, but also part of a global society, right? And this global society is becoming more connected through technology and especially through our expanding knowledge of the physical world. So I believe that, you know, we are part of our immediate community, but we're also part of a bigger community, which is the world itself. Um, so, with that disclaimer, if you guys want to add anything,
I think I would like to add one thing before we start. At what age did you, realize that we are actually true descendants of the the Incas or any other tribe that was here, indigenous native people? Because at one time I thought that I was like Hispanic or something, and that was it, you know. And I had this very minuscule view of indigenous people, native people, and it wasn't a good view in my opinion. So I really had to, do some soul searching and some research for myself and realize, the lies that, I think that we are fed to say that we aren't native people and we are something else. Latino or Hispanic or even, mestizo. If I was in Peru, I believe that is what I would be called or categorized as. So yeah, I'm just curious if you don't mind.
um, I think subconsciously it's always been there since I came to the United States. But I think what really triggered this desire to identify myself as a Native American, at least a Native South American, is after I graduated from college, I majored in English and philosophy, which led me to read um, a lot of Western stories in philosophy. I read Moby Dick. I read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and that really inspired me to be like, I can probably tell a story as well, but what would that story be like? Like through what perspective would that be? So you ask yourself, what is my voice as a writer? And so that's how I came to like realize maybe my identity or my storytelling could be through honing in and identifying myself through this native indigenous descendant, you know
Yeah.
descendants, I mean, of people. um, so it really took more speed after I graduated from college and I began writing stories.
It's really fascinating. Thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah, for me, again, like it was at a certain age when I don't know. I guess it was just reading books and just like watching documentaries, and then learning about the government census and whatnot, and just other things that I think we're told, and just I don't know, because maybe it's not TMI, but during my undergraduate years, I was a part of some like Latino Hispanic group, and then I realized that I really had nothing in common with what they were, or what they would post in their social group or anything. And maybe that's just because I was an adoptee as well. But I don't know. I wanted to find more out about myself. So I think that's one of the key contributors that led me to today where I'm at. Um, yeah, thank you again, more for sharing. And Juan Chiloa, I wanted to say, loving the shirt. So
Oh, thank you, man.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a Watch Shield Nation for my tribe down south.
yeah, looks great. But yeah, more. Let's go ahead and start, because I think we can talk more about this in depth as we get going.
Totally. I would like to first begin by doing a little bit of historical accounting. And again, for my disclaimer, I'm not a historian, so this is based on investigations and Googling things. From what I know, Peruvian civilization is about 5,000 years old, first appearing in the coastal region of northern Peru. This culture was called Corral civilization. According to Prom Peru, which actually is an official brand of Peru, the Corral civilization is more than 5,000 years old, and it developed at the same time as other great cultures like Mesopotamia, Egypt, and China. I know that in the region there are other cultures in this American region, such as the Olmec. They have been around since 1200 BC to 400 BC, which I think is the oldest civilization, the second oldest civilization in the Americas. I also want to add that the Peruvian people appear, through my investigations that I've seen in a lot of documentaries and reports, that they kind of like appear like flares of the sun, in the sense that historical records see them flourish, then they disappear. Yet in its place, another civilization appears. And some of these civilizations are, for example, the Chan Chan, Saipan, Nazca, Paracas, the Aymaras, the Incas, the Huancas, and the Chancas. So these are just to name a few, to name just some. But throughout South America, there are many more. However, if we look closer in all those civilizations, what stands out to me the most are two main symbols that I'm going to be later showing you guys. Two main symbols that have led my imaginative mind, again, I think because of my background in literature, story telling, and in philosophy, have made me conceive of the idea that the Peruvian history is in fact the unfolding of a single society's consciousness. There is the symbol of the winged man turned animal. That's one symbol that is not only in Peru, but it's also throughout Latin America, in North America, in South America. And there's also the Andean cross, also known as the Chicana. But other investigators who go more in depth say there's actually a native name to that symbol, which has been distorted through history. There's a YouTuber named Javier Lajo, and maybe we can link him up. We be supportive of each other. He says through his investigations, he says that the Andean cross is actually its actual name is the Tawapaka. So I thought that was really interesting because growing up, I knew of it as the Chicana. In the PowerPoint that I will later show, that I have constructed for this podcast, I would try to show that these two symbols appear throughout the entire American continent, which is very interesting to me because historians relate a story of two independent, non-communicative societies in the North and in the South, right? At least that's what I think. But I hope through the images to cast doubt on our viewers that it may not be true. As we see that in almost all cultures, the winged man who is present, as well as the Wanaka, aka Chakan. That would be later in this presentation. Do you guys want to add something in regards to these symbols? Do you guys know or have seen some of these symbols that I may be talking about? Especially Juan, you are part of a tribe, you said. Have you seen anything like that?
I haven't seen anything like that yet, but I'll be able to take a look more when I visit in September, because they're going to take me to some caves. They're going to make me walk the desert with them. Sorry, I choked a little bit with my saliva.
Right?
Yeah. No, I haven't seen anything like that, but I find it really interesting that you said that this is present not only down in the South, but in other parts. Because, I know there's been other histories, like oral traditions, where they say that natives have come from the South up here. Like, for example, in the book Indigenous Peoples' History of the U.S., the Cherokee, through their oral traditions, say that they were down in South America and they traveled through Mexico and now reside where they currently reside. So I find it very interesting.
Same here. Like they said in the Aztec during Tenochtitlan, they had like the giant zoo that they had there had like buffaloes and animals from North America. So I'll try to find where I found that at. It was an article, I think, or in a book that I read. But yeah, they said that there are all these like exotic animals. So there's obvious obvious trading between like the two civilizations. The northern natives and the Tenochtitlan, the Aztecs. Between tribes. So it's really fascinating. I think there's more to uncover and unravel than what we're told through the lens of the current historians. Not that I'm saying I'm taking anything away from them, but from what we're taught that there isn't that much communication. And I think what we're about to go through right now is really going to open some eyes.
Right, because that's basically what I was taught, at least in high school, like history. They never really mentioned like the United my apologies, the indigenous people here in the continental U.S. really interacting with those further down south, or even those further down south interacting with those in South America. So I just think it's interesting. It's not really something that's touched upon at all.
Yeah. But I think that, with, well, I was going to ask you more I know you didn't grow up in Peru, but I kind of wonder where in at least the Peruvian education system, at what point did they start at the Peruvian like history? Did they start at like, was it 1530 something when the conquistadors arrived? And that's when, well, even then, like Peru wasn't actually formed. Wasn't like it was more like larger state or something. And I apologize, my history is not 100% accurate. But did they go back to like when colonization started, or they cover like more history before that? Because we had the video with Ancient Americas, and we were talking about like the need for there to be more like in-depth history about Native Americans before like 1492. So we're hoping that can change in the future. Like before Columbus got here, like there's so much more history to unravel that you can really teach people. And so I was just curious on your position on that more, if you knew, and if you don't, it's all good.
Well, that's a really great question. I asked cousins and my parents who are fully Peruvian, and they've grown up over there, and wanting to know about our heritage. And what I found out is that usually the educational system teaches Peruvian history as spots in the region. They don't teach it like as a sequential events of a society, of a single society, but rather they will use titles like the Nazca culture, or like the Nazca civilization, or the Paracas civilization, the Chan Chan civilization. But there isn't like a narrative of a single consciousness of people through history, but rather like a spot here, a spot here, a spot here. So, which creates, in my opinion, also, disassociation from the rest of the people that live in Peru. Yeah.
Interesting.
And they do teach you, they teach you a little bit of Nazca, a little bit of the pre-Inca, and they teach the Spanish arrival part of history. But I wouldn't be able to go that much in depth because, I didn't grow up in Peru.
No worries. I appreciate that for your input. But yeah, shall we move on to the next part?
Yeah, which all of this I think brings me back to the current state, because the whole idea, I think, maybe of taking away from the video and from my presentation is that it is one consciousness of people through history. And I would like to cast some sort of evaluation from the viewers of the American history, um, and see that there is a correlation in history, and we are one single consciousness coming from the Corral times all the way to 2021. So to not acknowledge our past, to not acknowledge how far we come, I think it's, in my opinion, it's a contribution to perpetual disassociation from our own identity. And so I would like to now touch upon the current state of Peru. And I feel the reason why I'm doing mostly on Peru, because most of my knowledge is of Peru, because I'm from Peru, and I'm very little versed on other countries in the Americas other than the United States. So according to, actually I want to show you guys, according to this book, this beautiful book that I found in my parents' house, it's called The General History by Thomas Ojeda. The Inca period began in 1150, and it lasted until 1533, which in total would make up to 383 years of consistent succession of rulers, one after the other, beginning with Manco Capac and ending with Atahualpa, right? So it's 383 years of consistent ruling in Peru. We all know the arrival of the foreigners, and their system of government is the viceroyalty system of government that is started, according to the book, with Blasco Nunes as the first viceroyal king, and ended with Jose de la Serna as the last viceroyal king of Peru. And that was from 1544 all the way to 1821, which in total makes 280 years of viceroyalty in Peru. And I want to say that I'm a fluent Spanish speaker, so I keep up with the news of what's going on in Peru. And a lot of what I noticed in Peru in the news and in the narration they have they relate about themselves is that they count from the independence to today. And they give very little attention, at least in the mainstream media, what happened prior to the Declaration of Independence. And it's no little time. It's 280 years. You can't just ignore that. You can't just pretend like it's not there. During that time, things have happened, and who knows exactly what happened. And that time was the viceroyal time, you know. And so to me, that's a red flag when you're not mentioning a huge amount of time. It's in addition. It's something that you add again to this perpetual sense of disassociation from native roots, from indigenous roots, from native roots, from your quote unquote original roots. So you create gaps in history, not only in history, but in your consciousness. You create gaps that that are not filled. And so those gaps create, like, especially in Peru, again, in a disassociation from who you are, a person in power, and who the people are, people such as in the Amazon or in the highlands of the Andes. Anyways, do you guys want to add something to that?
Moncholo, did you want to add something first?
I was going to say, you find the same type of thing with Mexico. Like, I don't watch their news all the time, but I mean, I'm able to gather from engaging with a lot of Mexicans and my family who they did grow up in Mexico that they also don't really discuss too much before 1821, which is their independence, right? And they, everything is, well, it's really overt in Mexico, this whole, disassociation from native roots, because they really tried hard to push for like this whole new identity, this new national Mexican identity. So that's why a lot of that isn't really acknowledged, right? Or people are embarrassed to acknowledge those things in Mexico.
Wow. So it seems like, at least in Mexico as well, there's a common problem, or maybe not a problem, but a common issue going on. I want to continue with saying that, however, since 1821 to 2021, if my investigation is correct, there has been very little political and democratic stability in Peru. In Peruvian history, you will see that consistently there are 1, 2, and even 3 presidents who finish their presidential term. But for some reason, that's the most that sequential presidents Peru will have. And quickly, either the next president gets vacated or other powers want to take over. And the little political stability that has taken place, it's from the 2000s and up. So it's pretty recent. And I think this may have something to do with the advent of the internet, which, makes the government more at reach and a level of visibility in real time. For example, in September 30th of 2019, I was at work, minding my own business, watching videos, because they used to let us use their phones for that. Excuse me. And I was able to see minute by minute how the executive branch shut down the Peruvian Congress, and how Congress reacted was actually unconstitutional and attempted to vacate actually they didn't attempt, they actually did it. They vacated the president after they had been shut down, after they had been dissolved. But up until all the way to today, there is very little, up to none, accountability for those congressmen who try to vacate the president after they had been shut down. even today in 2021, none of the congressmen even mentioned what happened in 2019, as if it didn't even happen. So this makes me wonder what sort of unconstitutional acts happened prior to the internet, and that sort of ability to see them in real time. Not only that, but I think it creates some sort of culture in the Peruvian politics that if you know the right people, if you have the right connections, you can probably get away with a lot of unconstitutional acts, um, especially the congressmen. And I don't know if it's something similar like that in that you guys may know of in Mexico.
In Mexico, they had a lot of strife right after their independence. They went through several different governments, several presidents, presidents, but some of them were dictators that were ousted or replaced, assassinated. So there were multiple revolutions in Mexico. So you have the same problem, but the major issue you have with Mexico, even in the present day, to take it back, because you mentioned 2019 with Peru, is that it's really corrupt. So that's in every level of government. From what my family's told me, no accountability with law enforcement. Everyone's bought off. Everyone, So that's the major problem with the Mexican government itself. It's not trusted, and it's done really shady things. It's been to indigenous people as well. It's mistreated them as well. And statistically speaking, that happens more to the more poor people, to the more indigenous looking people, and to the more traditional people, right? Also the darker complexioned are more likely to be mistreated in Mexico by the government as well.
Yeah, I also would agree with you on Chilo, and I don't think it's like extremely covered too much in the in politics and in policies for the majority of the populace to understand. Like, there's serious issues going on, in these countries regarding corruption and other problems as well. So I think there needs to be more coverage on it, at least from an international level, so the world can understand like where we are at as in South and Central America.
Yeah, it's just the problem with corruption. Like it's so hard to solve the problem of corruption. Like corruption, in order to stop it, I would say you need to have a culture of like integrity and honesty with most of the population, and that's hard to really create on a whim. Like I'm not trying to be any which way, like, oh, like the U.S. is like the U.S. is pretty good as a country, but the U.S. has a culture a lot, at least with their governance of within the government ranks, of being honest and having integrity and high standards. So that's why, sure, you'll find corruption in the United States. Every country has it, but the U.S. has way less corruption than Mexico, where they don't have such a culture.
And it's bad because like in Mexico, you have the drug cartel, which is, plays a huge part in Mexico, unfortunately. And what was it? Who was the guy? I think it's like, well, his name again is like all Americans know, the drug lord.
Oh shoot, I can't remember. I can't remember. I don't even keep track of him because I'm just like, that guy's dumb. Like fuck that guy. So I don't really even remember his name. But yeah. I think I know who you're talking about. He got like extradited to the U.S. or something.
Yeah.
So, he got extradited here because they couldn't keep him in prison in Mexico. Again, going back to the corruption problem.
Yeah, that shows you how bad it is. Like your own prison can't keep freaking people. Oh my God, it's insane. So that shows you like how bad it is. So I think
right. So it makes like legislating policy or changes that much harder, because if you're relying on the government to enforce it, and the government's already corrupt, they're not going to do it, or they're going to enforce it haphazardly. So it's just a major issue. I don't know how deep the corruption is over in Peru. More, maybe you could elaborate on that. But I know in Mexico, it's a very huge issue. That's why the country is in such a sorry state.
From what I know from my investigations, corruption has happened since colonial times, I would say. And I wouldn't be quick to say, I would take more time to investigate why it happens. Because I talk to family members, I talk to people, and a lot of them give me like different sides. So immediately people would say like, "Oh, bad people. Why are they so corrupt?" But for example, in Peru, for the longest period of time, being indigenous, being native, was just enough reason to keep you out of the place of government. So a lot of them may have try to gain their foot into the government through avoiding steps, avoiding the legal ways. But that's because they were trying to get their foot in there. So I don't want to say that they're good people and it's a benign reason why they're corrupt, but I would just be careful on how to speak about who these people are that have been doing that. And I actually want to make a comparison between the United States and Peru, for example. In the United States, currently, right now, there is the investigations for the January 6th, I believe, the riot. It's taking place. There is accountability. George Floyd has been taking accountability for what he's done. So we see that, and as Americans, we feel comfortable. If something wrong happens, there will be accountability for that. But I imagine what it would be like to grow up in places like Mexico, Peru, and Guatemala, Honduras, where you don't see that, and there has been a blatant, in your face, on the nose, unconstitutional acts in the government in Peru. But again, no one talks about it. Congressmen, they don't talk about it. It's like, why do we perpetuate this custom of forgetting things? Let's not forget, and I think tying this podcast to the main idea of the channel of indigeneity is, let's not forget the history from the beginning to today. I don't know.
I think I had a commenter or a supporter one time speak about that problem of corruption, and yeah, he said like it comes from the Spaniards. I mean, I didn't do a bunch of investigations, but on its surface, he was saying it comes from them because they were corrupt and trying to take resources, and there are accounts where the crown, like the Spanish crown, would give laws or pass policies, sometimes in the favor of indigenous people, but the Spanish conquistadors or the noblemen down in Mexico, because Spain is very far away, they wouldn't follow it, and so they would engage in corruption and unlawful behavior. So I think a lot of it extends like through centuries through that colonialism. I agree.
I want to add, my favorite author is Herman Melville, author of Moby Dick. In Moby Dick, there is a chapter on Lima. Lima, back in those days, used to be a grand city. It was it was extravagant. But this is how far corruption goes. That the nickname of Lima was Lima the Corrupt. So even in even in this book, in this literary book, the corruption is is noticeable, and so it's nothing new today to see that.
Yeah.
So I want to continue with this presentation, and I actually took some time to investigate the ethnic demographics of Latin American countries. And I tried to actually find more reputable sources, more authoritative sources than Wikipedia, but I really couldn't. So for now, I think Wikipedia will do. And I want to start with Peru. I noticed that there is no one way that Wikipedia depicts ethnic groups in American countries. Peru, for example, according to the website, 60% of Peruvians are mestizos, 26% are Native Americans, and only 6% are Europeans. what I've noticed is that more often than not, the mestizo population is tied to education, to city living, to Spanish-speaking people, while the native communities, the Native American communities, are aligned to tribal communities, rural communities, and low levels of socioeconomics and poor education. So that is something that you will see consistently in the Americas. Now, I also took a look at Brazil's population. Brazil is a little bit different. It consists of 47.7% of Europeans, and from the little television watching that I've done, I can probably avow to that because a lot of the characters that I've seen in television they look pretty white, like just regular white people. Brazil, however, is divided more specifically into mixed ethnic groups. For example, there's a caboclo. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. Caboclo. It's a mix between Native Americans and Europeans, while the castizo is even more specific, and it relates to people who are 3/4 Spanish and 1/4 Native American. That is very specific. Between the caboclo and the castizo, the total percentage is of 22.3. But in comparison to Peru, Brazil has more black people. However, in Brazil, black people are divided into subcategories. For example, there's the mulatto, there's the quadroon, and there's the octoroon. Between all three of them, there's a total of 20.1% and a total of actually completely black people of 7.6%. Personally, I think that in the United States, all those subcategories would be regarded as black. So from like a United States perspective, it would actually be 27.6% of black people and 47.7% of white people and 22.3% of Native Americans. Now, this other one is Mexico, and maybe you would have something to say about this, because when it comes to Mexico, it's very interesting how they are divided ethnically. There are 21% of indigenous Mexicans. I would like to call them Native Americans. They also have 25% of mestizo population. Here too, there is a strong correlation between ethnic groups and geographic and socioeconomic groups. That correlation that I mentioned earlier in Peru, that's the same thing, similar here, which means that Native Americans tend to live in rural and small communities to the south. According to the website, 47% of the population are either light-skinned Mexicans or white-skinned Mexicans. But in this group, unlike Brazil, the castizos are included. So the castizos are included in the 47% of the population. Next is Colombia. Colombia ethnic groups was a little bit harder to read, because in this group, white people and mestizos are put together.
Yeah.
And together they make a total of 87.58% of the population, while the Native Americans are only 4.31% of the population. It would be interesting to see the real statistics of how many of that 87.58% are actually white people and how many of them are actually mestizos. That would be, interesting to divide it into those categories. Then I investigated a little bit on Argentina, because it's a pretty big country. I did like how clear and concise the Argentina ethnic demographic was depicted. 85% are white, and 11.1% are mestizos, and 1.0% are Native Americans. If we combine the mestizos and the Native Americans, it would make a total of 12.1% of actual Native Americans in Argentina. And Argentina is a pretty big country. Next is Honduras. Honduras demographic mixes both mestizo and European together, much like Argentina. And together they're 40%, while Native Americans are 28%. Again, it would be really nice to see how many of that 40% are actually white and how many of that 40% are mestizos. And lastly, I did a little investigation on Guatemala. Guatemala actually captured my attention because this is really nice. According to the worldatlas.com website, 42% are mestizo and 18% are white. Okay, so, but there's actually 4 main Native American groups in Guatemala. And if you add them up together, it makes a total of 40% of Native American population, which is actually more than the native population of Peru. But then again, Peru is a bigger country of 32 million people, but 33 rounding it up, while Guatemala only has 18 million people rounding it up. So I thought that was really interesting to see that almost all the countries divide mestizos and natives. Some countries like Argentina and Honduras, they put the mestizos and the whites together. But most of the other Latin American countries, they have 3, which is whites, mestizos, and natives. So again, this just ties that we are all over the American continent.
I think one thing I was just going to add really quick to take into account is like who really, identifies as a Criollo or white in general, because I watched this video in Chile, and it was about the Mapuches, and them wanting to get land back, and there was like certain European descendants that was given this land long ago, and I was just like, oh, I want to see these European descendant Criollos. And I saw them, and I kid you not, these people were as dark as me, if not darker. So I was like, okay, if those people are like European, then I must be Swedish or like of British descent. So I think that, and Juan Chilo and I think we watched a video in Cuba where this woman like asked these people like what they thought of themselves as, and there was like several people that clearly looked like native or at least like of some mixed descent. And they said that they were like European or white. And I was just like, wait, what? So, but I think people do this so they can blend in with, the white population, because they might see, indigenous or even mixed as in some sort of derogatory way, some negative, through a negative lens, I think. So that could be why they do that. Again, this is in Chile and Cuba, which are 2 countries that are entirely like different from Peru and Mexico and other countries as well. So yeah, that was really interesting to me.
Yeah, I found the Mexican statistics like interesting. Like, I mean, it's shocking that it says 47 are either light skinned or white. Like, well, I wonder what they consider like light skinned, and what percentage native would that light skinned even mean? Like, would I fall into that category? I don't know, but I'm straight up 50, right? 50%, and I'm like right at the shade. But I've seen people that, I don't know, it's weird because I've seen some natives that sent me DNA tests before. I know 2 women that sent me DNA tests. One was 65% native and one was 70%. So majority definitely. And they had pale skin, but they had indigenous facial features, indigenous hair, indigenous eyes. So so I wonder how they classify it, or is it more self-identification? Because I don't know. I went to Mexico. I only went to one state, Coahuila. I went to 2 states. I went to Nuevo León and Monterrey. But I'll tell you, I mean, I wasn't like really analyzing everybody's race when I went, because that's when like I thought we were all Hispanic or whatever. But I don't know. Like from what I remember, they don't seem to be like half the people there were white. So I don't know. It just seems off to me. And the northern region is considered the more white region, right? So I was in the northern region, and to me, I thought a lot of people just looked brown. So I just think it's interesting.
Yeah, part of the statistics that I presented, I found it interesting that Brazil, that level of minuscule way of subcategorizing people is crazy. It's like you have like
Yeah.
3 categories, but I feel like it might be true that, I mean, through a United States lens, you would see them all as shades of black people, but I don't know why they do that.
Yeah,
Another
it's
thing,
oh, go ahead, Morris. I was just gonna say that it's weird that they do it. I think it's really weird.
yeah, absolutely. And another thing that I've noticed is that if you actually, put in many of these countries, I was gonna do all the countries, but I was like, oh, this is probably too much. But I think these countries that I've showcased are very much representative of the rest of these countries in the Americas. And what happens is, if you put together the mestizo population with the Native American population, more often than not, for example, in Guatemala, you will find that the majority of people are not white. So that's something interesting to know in terms of connection to political um, positions,
Mm.
governmental positions, and how they can legislate, how they can administrate their country in the benefit of their historical ancestry, not necessarily um, disadvantage others because they're white, but rather close a gap that has been consistently happening since very early in our histories of marginalization of people based on their features, based on their skin colors. And that's why you don't see a Native American Bezos, you don't see a Native American Mark Zuckerberg, because consistently, I don't know who's doing is it. I would be careful to point out fingers, but consistently there has been a marginalization of people because of their beliefs, because of their customs, their rituals, and the way that they look. So I don't know. I just wanted to highlight that.
I can attest to that. I was in Guatemala recently, and you're right, more like, yeah,
What'd you
like,
see?
sorry,
What'd you see?
I saw natives all over.
Yeah.
Mestizo
Not
concept is a lie.
nothing but a bunch of Indios, man. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it was weird because like I did see like a few, like, what you would say whites or criollos, like working. A lot of them were at the airport, like working the airport. But yeah, majority of them, like, I mean, when I was in Antigua and walking a little bit in Guatemala City and like a few other like areas, like it's clear that the mestizo concept in Guatemala at least it's not, the population is not accurate. I don't think it really represents us. So again, like, the purpose of the channel is talking about why this is a silly government word to use in a census. I think obviously there are clearly more native people than what we are told.
Yeah, and I mean, it would be such a great content to further talk about this in another opportunity, in another video. What are the consequences of these divisions that between Native Americans and mestizos, that, as you said, you clearly go to Guatemala and you clearly see that they will not pass a single day as a white person or as a European, but yet they disassociate themselves from the native population. And why is that would be such a great topic to expand on, maybe through some research, through some JSTOR, I don't know, articles or whatever. But it's really interesting. But it has really visible consequences, I think, what that division.
In a sense, yeah, it does create division. I mean, it teaches us to at least natives in these countries or that would see themselves as mestizo or Latino, to put the indigenous identity in a negative lens. I think there's enough information that's evident to where, I mean, we see it like the derogatory language towards native people. What is it in Mexico? Don't be an Indio.
Yeah.
Just all these other negative perceptions of
You're
the
right.
indigenous people, and it's really bad. And it teaches self-hate and all these other negative things. So again, like it's all embedded in Latino culture. Unfortunately, it's taught by the higher ups, the bigwigs, the guys in charge, administration, government positions. If they wanted to put change into this, they could, but they enjoy the division. They see that what we are talking about as something that is entirely wrong. So I'm glad that we're able to step on, some toes here, because the toes need to be stepped on. We have to tell the truth and only the truth. And right now, like the direction of where a lot of people are going with this culture really, really is not good, especially like for indigenous rural communities, like, because again, it teaches self-hate. Sorry. And it teaches, like it just is racism. It teaches racism. And to think that you're better than someone else. Like, for example, me, like, again, I see myself as a native person, but if I dress up in a work suit, am I still looked at as a native person? Like, is that how it is like in Peru? No, clearly, like how would I say? I think we are taught that if a native is living in an urbanized city, goes to work as a work suit, lives in some house, is he still considered like an indigenous or native person? No, they categorize this person as a mestizo, or someone clearly not native, and that is something that very much needs change. So that's why I'm glad that you and Moore and Wanchelo and I are able to talk about this further in depth, and more people are waking up to this too.
More like you tell me your perspective, because you're very fluent in Spanish, but from what I saw with Google Translate, I researched this, and then I also have a translator down in Mexico City that translates a lot of my written works, like my articles that I get published. So he translates them from English to Spanish, right? He says, and Google Translate also say that mestizo means half-breed, right? Whereas mixto and mezclado means mixed, right? But mestizo is akin to half-breed. So I think that's like also really derogatory. I don't know why people don't realize that either. I never hear people saying, "Oh, we're mixto" or "estamos mezclados." They always say we're half-breeds. Why? Like that's also another thing that bugs me too. And everyone seems to think mestizo is like a good term, but it's like you're really just insulting yourself every time you use it.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And growing up, that word mestizo, it's so funny. You're absolutely right, because it does say half breed, and that is what it refers to. But people like they nominate themselves as that. They say I am mestizo, as if it was like something better than not being indigenous. I don't know why that happens. Well,
right, because I mean, if you make that statement in English, like it sounds cringeworthy. Like if I go around saying I'm a half breed, I sound fucking cringy. Like what the fuck?
Yeah. I mean, and a lot has to do with the correlation between, again, with socioeconomics, a perpetuation of like in not speaking Spanish. A lot of indigenous people speak Spanish differently, and when you go to the city and you make your I's into E's, people make fun of you and they speak ill of you. So that has been consistently the case in Peru for a while. I think that in Peru recently, the mindset is changing a little bit ever since the Peruvian food, the gastronomy of Peru has been made global. A lot of people have been slowly honing in that sort of like authenticity of who they are as opposed to trying to be something else. It's slowly happening, but at least there's light.
Right. No, I'm happy to hear that too. But I know in Mexico that is the case. I was reading a book called Mexico Racista by Federico Navarrete. So I recommend that to you if you're ever interested. She speaks about the races of Mexico and like the myth of mestizaje from a Mexican anthropologist, that writes that he lives in Mexico and all that. But yeah, they make fun of indigenous people down there if they speak butchered Spanish because they're used to speaking their indigenous language. That's also a trend there.
I want to ask you, I don't know how the Mexican television portrays these people, but in Peru, and having grown up here in the United States, and growing up under these democratic values and freedoms that we cherish and makes our lives so wonderful to live here. I look at some of the Peruvian television programs, and it's crazy how up to this day, I don't know if this happens in Peru, but they do like brown face, and they also include white face. Like they'll paint like a black person into like a white person, and they'll paint like a white person into a black person, and they will like caricaturize indigenous people. They will like caricaturize them and put them in a setting like in a city, and they will like speak their like Spanish all not that well, and like that's supposed to be comedy. It's under the genre of comedy, and they put them in these circumstances where like they go to the city and they're wearing these like native looking shoes and their native apparel, and it's crazy how in Peru that's funny. Like people laugh, and I'm like, I mean, from my American United States perspective, I'm like, oh my god, like I can't believe they're doing that. That's crazy. So I don't know if that happens in Mexico.
I think that's extremely freaking racist and disgusting, man. That's what the hell. Mexico, I'm not aware of something like that overt. Like that's like really racist. But in Mexico, what they do with the indigenous people and people in the comments, comment if you've seen something similar to what Moore said. But what I have seen in Mexican television and what I've heard about is that whenever they do have indigenous actors portraying a role, right? The role is always a servant. It's always a maid. It's always somebody that's uneducated. It's always somebody that's stupid. That's what they characterize indigenous people as. That's the roles they're relegated to in the media.
Yeah. Again, that's such gold content to touch upon for another video. I actually want to share my little presentation that I've created, and I'm really excited. I'm really excited about this. Okay.
We're excited to see it.
Okay, let's start from the beginning. Let's see. I should probably do. How do you play it? Okay. Should I just go like this, or how do I play it? Oh crap! You just full screen. Yeah. Okay, there you go. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so earlier today I was saying that there seems to be this two types of iconography that appears pretty prevalent in throughout the Americas. And if you don't believe me, just watch, as they say. One of them is the bird/feline/reptile being. And the other one is the Chicana, or AKA the Tawapaca, I believe that's what it was. I also included my IG account, if you guys want to follow me, and my YouTube account. It's just my name. So just YouTube my name and subscribe. Okay, I will go ahead and start with this. I titled the beginning Coastal States because a lot of these civilizations happen in the coast of Peru. Okay, and feel free to chime in at any time, guys. Here is Lord Saipan. He is the lord of a civilization that took place in Peru, in the coast of Peru. And next to it is Pachacamac, who is this individual right here. And in terms of pointing out, similarities, if you look at his earring pieces, that is very similar. The piece that he's wearing in his ears and the headpiece. Okay, so that's one similarity. This is both in Peru. This one is in the first picture that I have is of Tiwanaku, Bolivia. This is part of the Sun Door. And the one to its right is a depiction of very similar entities. And you can see the wings in both of them. But the other one is in Bolivia. I'm sorry, in Peru. I'm sorry, am I doing full screen?
Yeah, we can see it fine.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, I wasn't
You're
sure if
good.
it was. Oh, yeah, it is. Okay, my bad. So here's another similarity. One is in Bolivia, one is in Peru. I like to call it Kavin Wantar. I don't do the ch sound. I say Kavin Wantar to the right and Tiwanaku to the right, to the left. Both winged individuals, both with the headpiece, both with the nostril, bird-looking entity, which is crazy that you will find that in two different societies, in two different periods in time. Now, what we have next, these two depictions are from Peru. One is from the Paracas culture, and the other one is from the Nazca culture. They're two separate cultures happening in separate times. However, you will find very similar iconography happening. For example, above the head of the right image, you will find that sort of whiskers sort of image on top of his head. And to the right, you will find the same thing of that individual. And something that I want you guys to notice from the onset is that these wide open eyes and the pupils right in the middle, that is going to be consistent throughout all these images that I'm going to show you. Okay, next would be, okay, so this is pretty interesting to look at. So to the left, we have the Aztec calendar, and in the middle, you will see an individual. And what you will see is the wide eyes and the earpiece. Now, if we look back at this individual, Lord Saipan, his earpiece is very similar to the earpiece that he's wearing. And also, if we look at the Pachacamic Lord, you will see the earpiece there in the wide open, wide eyes. Here in the Nazca, in the Paracas, you will see the widening of the eyes, still pretty prevalent in the Aztec culture as well. Now, what I found in here is the Nazca people have this individual to the right who is sticking out the tongue. And it's very similar to the way that the Aztec individual is sticking out his tongue. Again, all of this is supposed to raise curiosity in you guys. I'm not making assertions like this is the case. Okay, I'm not. I made my disclaimer, so just go with me. Here, the next image, we have the Aztec calendar. And I like actually this picture because this one is in colors. And you will see his earpiece, his tongue sticking out, those wide eyes. And to the left, you will have the sun plate, the Inca sun plate. And something that you will notice is the fangs in the sun plate and the wide eyes in the sun plate, right? The wide eyes is something consistent. Now, the Chicana, aka Tawapaca, is present in the Tawanaka culture. I'm sorry for misspelling this. Oh gosh, somebody's gonna come for me for these, but I misspelled these. The Tawanaka culture. This is a recreation of their temple. The Chicana. I don't know where this comes from, but some people call it the Andean cross. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's also known as that. Okay, next we have Bolivia and Peru. Now, Bolivia, this is part of the Tiwanaku culture to the left and the Chan Chan to the right. And you will see in both the depiction of the Chicana, aka Tawapaca iconography in both images. Again, different places in space, different times in history. Let's move on to another pieces of in Peruvian cultures, such as chanchan. These are earrings to the left. That's a really cool earring, isn't it? The emperors, or at least that's how they say historically, used to wear. And on the right, you will see the same but upside down, right? But the one on the right is the one that goes on your nose. So it would be like this. You see how he's wearing that nose piece? You can't see his mouth. So this right here, the one on the right, is a nose piece. Now, what I want you guys to take into account is this sort of ladder, sort of echelon, sort of images that you see here is consistent in many cultures. Now, this is in Peru. This one is in Tiwanaku, Bolivia. Now, let's look at another part in history of Chanchan, Peru. This is some of their adobe construction. And here you will see again that sort of ladder sort of images at the bottom. Can you see my mouse? Okay. At the bottom, and also here, if you look at here, you will see that here. And this is the parts of the Tawapaca. And here on the right, you will see it in like as a wall decoration, or maybe it wasn't a decoration. I don't know. I can't assert that. Okay, this one is really interesting because it's been happening in Bolivia and it's been happening in Peru, but now it's happening in Mexico, in the Teotihuacan civilization of Mexico. This individual, I find it super interesting because it meshes both the iconography of the Chicana, but also in addition to that, to the wide-eyed person. So you see how his head is in sort of like a ladder shape?
Yeah.
And it has the same wide eyes, and these two fangs underneath are his fangs. So this one I find it really interesting because it ties in both the Tawapaca imagery and the fanged, wide-eyed individual. And to the right is also another image of the Teotihuacan civilization that you will see the latter images. Now, this is really cool because it goes up to North America, right? Now we're talking about the USA. To the left and to the right, we have household items, or maybe ritual items, I don't know that, of the Chaco population in the United States. And here again, you will see in the bowl, you will see the Chicana right there. You will see the Chicana there. Okay, look at that, and then look at this. It's the same iconography. This one is in Chanchan, Peru. This one is in Chaco, USA, and this one is in Mexico, and this one is in Bolivia. So you have two huge, vast distance territory, yet we find very similar iconography. What does this mean? What is it all for? I think we can leave that to somebody who can do deep investigations, but my job is to, showcase these images to you guys. Now let's keep going. This one is in Ollantaytambo, Cusco, Peru, and you will find the latter again. This is different sides of the Chicana. This one looks very similar to what you see in the Tiwanaku, Bolivia culture. Here you will see them in the Ollantaytambo. And if you were doubting, here's on the right, there is the Chicana, but on both sides. So usually you get them only on one end, but here you get both ends. You have here at the top and here at the bottom. And look at, if we flip this, can I flip it? Oh, damn, I'm doing this live. Okay. Look how I flipped it. No, let me flip it. Oh, crap. let me flip it the other way around and compare that to this in Chaco, USA. And this is Ollantaytambo, Peru. Okay, let's keep going. The Paracas people in Peru as well, they had this ladder imagery as well. So I think that in these slides, I have been able to cover South, Central, and North America. And these are some images. I can spend a lot of time searching for more, but these are some. I'm going to stop here for now. What do you guys make of this?
I think it's fascinating that, I mean, like the fact that it's there in Bolivia and Peru, you know, that's interesting. But the fact that you have that similarities even in Mexico and then in the United States, or the continental U.S., right? The latter is, I mean, it's really obvious. So I think there might have been an exchange. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think there was. I know that book, like I said, that Indigenous Peoples' History of the U.S., certain tribes do have oral tradition that they originated in South America and they moved up through Mexico and into the U.S. So maybe that was part of that, right? They brought that over here. I know for a fact, I know there was one other tribe besides the Cherokee, but the Cherokee were definitely one of those that have that oral tradition.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really is fascinating because I think we're told, or a lot of people say that, like, there's no way that, you know, these tribes all the way at the bottom of South America and like in North or Central America could have, you know, found each other or did all this, you know, this vast trading. But then, you know, here we are, like, proving those doubters wrong. Like, there was clear, like, communication. You can see it. Like, it's in, like, everything that you've shown here, man. Like, in the artwork and the design. Like, I always wonder if there's more information that might be even, I don't know, maybe it's not being kept from us, but there's a lot more to discover than meets the eye.
Yeah, and if we really want to push the envelope, do we stop at mere communication, or can we make allegations of, you know, sharing concepts, sharing ideas, or having the same views on certain things about, for example, the physical world? We don't know how they interpreted space and time. Space and time are very real. We don't know how they interpreted that. So are we limit ourselves at merely sharing information, or can we say that they did in fact have the same ideas or the same way of thinking, just maybe a little bit different according to you know, how they wanted to portray that? You know, I would say let's push the envelope. You know, how far can we take this? Let me go ahead and continue here. Now we're gonna go into the more anthropomorphic visuals. This individual is I don't know actually who he is, but this is in Tiwanaku. Both are actually in Tiwanaku. This imagery to the right is the individual at the top of the sun door, and from his head you can see like felines coming out. You can see well, I will show you later on the next one, but there is also a ladder here where he's standing. To the left you will see him not as a 2D depiction, but as a 3D depiction, an actual statue. I would like to think that that's the same one. Again, wide eye, Mexican iconography, wide eye, Tiwanaku iconography, wide eye, Tiwanaku here, and these the sort of I don't know how to describe this thing that's coming down his from his eyes on his face, but that's another one, right? Okay, now let's look at this one. Now this is a depiction of this same one, but this is with the whole. If you look at down here at the bottom part, you will see this sort of ladder, right, going up. This is one side of the Chicana of the Pahuapaca. I may be saying that wrong. Again, you can find this image in the United States in the Chaco culture, and that's as much time as I had to availability to search. But I am sure that if I take more time and search for more places, I can probably find very similar images in all these places. Now, this is in Tiwanaku. The one in the middle is in Cavinwantar in Peru, and a similarity that you will see is this way of holding two scepters on the right and on the left. That is very common. And the Chapish, the one at the very end, he's from Juning, and
More, I think your mute's on.
my bad. This
You're
is
good.
happening on the Chapish guy is happening in 2021. So I feel like maybe some people don't realize, but a lot of what we do is still tied to very ancient stuff that has happened in the continent. So it's just a matter of, being able to acknowledge that and not live your day as if it's not there. Let me continue with the reason why I picked out this image is because you will look at these little snakes that are here. By the way, take account of these fangs of this individual. That will be our recurring imagery throughout the Americas. But these little snakes are also present. This is in the Cavinwantar region of Peru. And here he is again in the Tiwanaku region and again in the Cavinwantar. Let's go ahead and move on to this, which I found it really interesting. To the left, you have an individual from Tikal, Guatemala, and you will see that his headpiece, look at his headpiece, and it is, to me, that is very, very similar to what's going on here. Look at the Cavinwantar individual here. This headpiece is also in the Tikal headpiece right here. If you look at his earpiece, it's very similar, at least aesthetically, to the Saipan Lord, who is right here. And if you look closely enough, the Tikal individual, he's wearing like a vest, right? Or what do you call that? Like a really short poncho, or I don't know, like that thing on his neck is the same thing in the Saipan Lord. He's wearing that as well. So this will be very common to find. Now let's look at the Mayans. In the Mayans, you will find the same thing. Look at the beads on his neck, this circular beads on his neck, and look at the Chan Chan culture here, where also beads. And look at these earpieces that he's wearing, like earrings. Here in the Maya culture, and here in the Tikal culture, in the Chan Chan culture, very similar. So the white, also again, the white eye, look at the white eye there in Mexico, and look at the white eye here in Peru, in Nazca, Peru. It's very similar. Now let's go to Toltec, Mexico. Very similar aesthetic. You have the nose piece, you have the earpiece, the circular earpieces. You have the chest piece, right here, the chest piece. Now, they look a little bit different, but very similar aesthetic to the left and the right. One from Maya, one from Chan Chan, Peru. This one is from Tikal, Mexico. And the other one, the one to the right, let's see if I pronounce this right, Purepecha, Mexico. A very similar idea where you have the earpieces here in Mexico, the chest piece that keeps going. Now let's move on to the, what time is it? Okay, let's keep going to the Toltecas, Michoacan region, where you have this individual. And when I was looking at this video, they said that this headpiece is supposed to be the peacock feathers. And let's go back to the Chupaca region or province of Peru. This is live today, and he's wearing a peacock headpiece.
Yeah.
This is very similar to what was happening here in Tolteca, Michoacan, Tulsa. So again, let's connect. We're the same. We're all, I believe there's a connectivity between all of us. Okay, Tenochtitlan, Mexico, wide eye, fangs, feline looking face. Cavin, Peru, fangs, wide eyes, wide nose. Lord Saipan, white eyes, your fangs, very similar to what's happening in here in Tenochtitlan. In Tikal, Guatemala, Central America, I snapshotted this image from the Tikal, Guatemala ruins, or whatever you want to call it. Again, you see the fangs here, the white eyes. In Chanchan, Peru, here is even more evident.
Yeah, white eyes.
And keep these white eyes in Chanchan. Remember that because, well, it's right. It's the next slide. But it's here also, the fangs in Chichen Itza, another region of Mexico, the white eyes. You have the eyes. Now, what do they mean and what do they stand for? I don't personally know, but it would be really interesting. Here, this, I think they played like a game here on this thing, right? And so you have like eyes. These are eyes. After looking at this, I know that these are not just serpents. These are eyes. So maybe you have like one individual, two. You have three individuals because two eyes belongs to one individual. So in total, there will be three individuals here that make up this snake figure. Now, if you thought that the feline imagery was just in the face, now we go to Chichen Itza. Now here is the entire body of the feline. So you have the head of the feline, you have the whole body, and this is something that you have to look closely in these ruins. Again, here in Chichen Itza, you have the feline headpiece, but as opposed to the earlier ones, here you have a depiction of the actual being, but here it seems like they're wearing it as a headpiece. This seems to be like the actual being in Chan Chan, and what he's wearing. Oops, where did it go? Oh, here it is. My bad. And what he's wearing is actually a headpiece, and you see the feathers in the back. And let me finish it with this. The Aztec on the left and Cavin Wanter to the right. Now, this is very similar in terms of the fangs, the eyes. Have I wowed you guys so far?
Yes.
Most definitely.
Yeah, I didn't expect to see all this.
Yeah, it just shows you how we are all, connected. And it really is like, because I was in Chichen Itza and I saw like what you showed here more. So, seeing all these like the same eyes and whatnot, all of this artwork and just so many things, like there's so much more to uncover of our history, and I appreciate you doing all this work, man, because it's just, I don't think it's touched on enough, so because I think the people that are watching this are really learning a lot too.
Yeah, and I would say let's push how far we can take this.
Yeah.
Do we just conform ourselves with saying, oh yeah, these are really nice images that they have in common? Or I mean, we are descendants of these people, so I feel like we have the authority to speak upon ourselves. How much can we push this narrative, and what sort of narrative can we push upon these common images that we have in all these places? Let me keep going, unless Juan has something to add.
The only thing I was going to add is, well, that, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's kind of like creepy in a way if you think like what caused all these civilizations to replicate like some of these same deities, like did they all see something? Did they all have some sort of experience hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago that we are not even aware of? Obviously before there was even the written word, before there was video cameras and all that. Like when you think about that, that's kind of the thought's a little unsettling. What they could have seen and why they have all this.
I have a response to that, but I'm not gonna make it yet. I'm gonna do it at the end, and maybe it will spark curiosity upon our viewers. Let me continue with again with Cavan, Peru, the fangs, the eyes, and at some point it felt like when I was looking for these images, I'm like, oh my god, this seems really repetitive and it's kind of boring now. But I mean, when I was looking for these images, you hear the narration of the people that are like viewing them, and none of them say like, oh, you will also find this in Cavan, Peru. Like, what I'm trying to say is that we still believe that these cultures are happening independent of each other in geographical places. And when we don't acknowledge these, we perpetuate that narrative. So I would just like to say, let's change that and let's continue. So here, this head snake is really interesting because here in Chichen Itza you will find it, but it's also here. If you look at the little snake here in Cavan, right here in the middle, I don't know if our viewers may be able to see it, but here on his sides, at the level of his waist, you will find those little snakes. Now, in the Cavan culture, they did not expand so much on these snakes, but in the Chichen Itza, is it Chichen Itza? I'm sorry. Yes, Chichen Itza culture, they have. This is a 3D imagery of those little snakes that are coming out of his waist. I don't know what it means, but it's there. Okay, here we will find it as well. You have the fangs, the big eyes, and the little snakes in Chichen Itza, Mexico. And this is really interesting. Well, in Cavan Huantar, this is really interesting because, how can I say this? According to the perspective, you will see something different. So it's not one thing, one set thing. Like, let me rotate it. Okay. If I rotate it, you will see, okay, like this. One eye, fangs. So this is a face of an individual. If I rotate it like this, no, let me rotate it the other way, sorry. If I rotate it like this, look, eye, and this is the mouth and the fangs of another individual.
Yeah.
If you rotate it like that. And if you rotate it like this, I guess to its original position. Wait, no, let me do it a little bit more like that. There's the head of the snake. The Cavan Huantar is this same snake that you see here. This snake that you see here, it's right here.
Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah.
He's right there.
Nice.
See, look at the eye, look at the fangs. Look at the eye, look at the fangs. So it's according to perspective. What do you see according to the perspective, to the subjectivity that you have when you're viewing these images? So at first view, you say, oh, it's a cool looking bird. But if you look closely, there are multiple individuals in that picture. And here's one. Look at that. The eye and the fang. There's a whole different individual. And here is the snake. This snake from Chichen Itza is here in Cavan Huantar. Two different continents that supposedly had no connection whatsoever. At least that's how they depict it in his history. Now, we have the Olmec how are we doing in time? Okay, I think we're still good, right?
We're good. Don't worry about time. We're all
Okay. The Olmec culture, if you look closely, it's white eyes, fangs, and which is basically this individual, right? Is this individual that we saw earlier, right here? Is this? It's Kavenwanter. This individual is the same individual as is here in the Olmec. White eyes, fangs. He's right there. Now to the right, you will see the snake in the Olmec people. The snake, fangs, white eye. Here in Chichen Itza is there too again. Very interesting that it's happening in Olmec, by the way, as I mentioned at the beginning, is I believe is the second oldest culture that here in the Americas. Okay, now we have Wari in Peru, and we have Tiwanaku in Bolivia. This sun here, by the way, the stairs. You can clearly see the stairs here, which is one side of the but the Tawapaka, aka what was it? I forgot the other name. Chacana. Sorry about that. And here is the same individual, white eyes, and here the eyes are protruding in a three-dimensional way. Look how it's protruding. Even the nose is protruding in a three-dimensional way. Two different countries. Here's Kavenwanter, Fang individual, big eyes. Another one here. This is something I found very interesting through my research. The entrance to the Kavenwanter ceremonial place looks like this, and the entrance to the Chichen Itza, Mexico place also looks. It's very similar. Two columns, a space in the middle. I mean,
Yeah.
I hope it's thought-provoking at the least.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
Here we have, I think this is a little bit too light, may not be able to see it completely, but here, supposedly, this is the female Kavenwanter, and this is the male Kavenwanter, and you will see by how it's depicted here in the genital area where it would be. So this is supposed to be the male, and this is supposed to be the female. Equal to each other. Here we have other depictions of the Kavenwanter civilization, winged individuals. This headpiece looks like the Aztec headpiece. These wing individuals. Here is the nose, the beak of a bird-looking individual. Okay, I have one last section, but so far, what do we think?
Were you gonna say something, Marshall?
I was gonna say, obviously, I don't want people to be like, "Oh, you're jumping the gun," but I just think there really was a lot of cultural exchanges, or if not, maybe this goes so far back as to when if you give credence to the land bridge theory, maybe when we were all close to together, right, and then they split off. Maybe a lot of that traces back to those times, I don't know. I just think it's a lot of coincidences for it to just be entirely up to chance. I think saying it's all chance is a bold assumption.
I wish the Incans and us in Peru would have had the Macoites too. That's a treaty I'm talking about. Am I right? So we get to defend against the Spaniards, the conquistadors.
I think had our people just I know the Mexica, the Aztecs, they had metal casting because they would have gold and silver, but if they had metal casted iron or maybe steel, and they had those types of weapons and armor, I think if all our people had weapons steel or iron armor and swords, then the Spaniards wouldn't have won. But I think because we were a little behind in terms of the armor, because armor is a huge deal when it comes to conflict. If you have good armor, that's everything. I think that's what put us at a big disadvantage.
In the Moche Saipan region, they actually knew how to well. And so let me go back to this piece. this is very intricate work that you have in his nose piece. And the way that they were able to do it is through welding. And so when you look at the documentaries and the reports on these people, they always ask, how did they know how to weld at that time?
Yeah.
But they did it. So I feel like maybe they had more knowledge, but something happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they could have just metal casted or had iron armor, steel armor, all that. It's just that they didn't think to do it. I think that's all it was.
Okay. I just realized that I ended a little chat on the side, so this looks much better, a little bit bigger. Let me continue here with these images that I was able to gather from some videos that I saw in the Peruvian region where Machu Picchu is in Cusco, and maybe say some things as I'm passing through these. It's very noticeable that I believe there is a level of information and knowledge that they had to have had in order to do this. The way that history depicts indigenous native people like savages or non-educated people, I think it's misguided and it's erroneous, because clearly there was levels of information that we knew at some point to be able to construct these things, these monuments. This is all happening in Cusco. Some of these were living quarters, some of these were storage quarters, storage for food. This one, from another angle, the one on the left, from another angle, you look at it, it looks like a castle. I kid you not. It looks like a castle, and it looks like freaking out of some storytelling book that out there.
Yeah, it looks like it's straight out of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
I swear to God.
The world.
And it looks beautiful. And I mean, I didn't include, but somewhere here, the Incas were able to conduct water all the way to here to be able to give each other, I mean, themselves baths. So hydraulics, ability to do this. You have to know how much weight you can put on this side of the mountain so that it won't slide down. You have to have mathematical knowledge. You have to have architectural knowledge to be able to do these. And so my question is, what happened? At what point did we lose it, or did somebody make us lose it? I don't know. Here you will find the Oaxaca, Mexico,
Oaxaca.
to the left. How do you pronounce it?
Oaxaca.
Yeah, Oaxaca.
Oh, you're good.
There's no there's no H there.
Yeah.
Okay, Oaxaca to the left, and Cavenwater to the right, and you will see the similarity of how these constructions are made, especially here, the Oaxaca, the dented sort of inward quadrilateral space. You will also find it here in the Cavenwater region of Peru, 2 different places, 2 different times in history, yet you find it. So again, I don't mean to be restating myself, but let's push this narrative beyond sharing information. I don't know how that would sound like, but beyond that, there seems to be maybe a ideology, similarity of beliefs and ideas and concepts that they may have had about their world in which they lived, and about space and time, that we may not be able. Maybe a lot of this iconography visuals that I've shown you guys have something to say about that, but we don't know how to read that because there's a gap, right?
Right.
Okay. Here is another image that I found To the right, you will find Chaco, USA, circular buildings in which people lived and did certain things. And in the left, you will find Espinar, Cusco, where they had a lot of like circular buildings, as you can see. By the way, this is not the only one. I couldn't find the name of the other place, but there are other places supposedly prior to the Incas that also did a lot of circular buildings. So I thought that was interesting, although not very overtly, but very similar in terms of, why would you build circular rooms? That seems counterintuitive today. Almost done here in the Pachacamac region. You have this this beautiful monument. If you look at these windows / doors or whatever they are, this sort of like, they're not parallel, right? I don't know if you can tell that in the image, but they're not parallel. If you keep going in the lines, they will touch at some point. So they're a little bit slanted. These doors, and these types of doors, you will find them, and that could probably be for another occasion. You will find them in the Inca, in the pre-Inca, and all over Peru. You will find this sort of like a slanted sort of entrances that you will find. And another thing I want to say is that, people, the way that we think of, or the way that history thinks of indigenous ritual shamanistic people that are portrayed as indigenous, as natives, are highly correlated with lack of education, lack of information, and through these images, I would say that's clearly not the case. At some point, and especially in Peru, we had information. And not only were we living, as you can see, in the Andes, and I'm missing images from the jungle region, from the Amazon region. I think that would be great for another occasion. But we also live, and I think this would be 2 points that I would like to make, that the Peruvian people are not solely Andean people. There's a narrative, a huge narrative out there, that being Peruvian means being Andean. That is not the case. This is one out of like thousands of civilizations that lived in the coastal region of Peru. Peruvians are not solely Andean high mountain people. We are coastal people. But because the Europeans landed in the coast, there is a strong association. If you're from the coast, you tend to be mestizo or white. And if you're brown and indigenous looking, then you're from the Andes. But that narrative, I think, has to change, because just archaeological places alone will show us that that is not the case. Peruvians are coastal, Peruvians are high Andes, and Peruvians are jungle people. And we are all over in those three regions. We don't come from the peaks of high Andes. We're all over the region. This is the Sacsayhuaman. I think I totally misspelled this, but the point is that this is Sacsayhuaman, and I don't know. This is just to like push your imagination. I mean, I don't know what this was, but it looks amazing, and it gives you room to speculate. And lastly, I want to finish with, in terms of images, I want to finish these people, this group of women from Mexico and these group of women from Cusco. I personally don't see a lot of difference. I see each other us as being very similar in terms of physiognomy.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it goes back to the like we're one race of people. Native Americans, we're all one race. I know some people, like I haven't run into many natives that'll argue against it, but I've run into one or two that have been like, no, like the Apaches and somebody else, like they gave some weird a word like autochronous or some, I don't know. There's some weird shit based off like some language group, and they're like, no, like those are separate races. Like the Apaches and like indigenous Mexicans are separate races. I'm like, no, they're not. They're all genetically related. What are you talking about? But yeah, these pictures are good in like proving that.
I want to add my speculative storytelling, highly imaginative interpretation of this.
So before we head in, we'll call this section of the video headcanon, which, you know, we just come up with possible lore as to why this is the case.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I want to make an analogy between the United States. The United States has a seal, right? A federal nation has a seal. There is the eagle with his grass holding, with his two talons, by the way, some sort of plant, right? Some sort of plant. He's holding it like this, right? The American eagle. And that symbolism is the symbolism of a federal nation. Even though in California we have something smaller, I mean, something subjective to our region of California, likewise in Arizona and all these other 50 states, there is one image of the federal nation, federal government in these places. I believe through my imaginative perspective and my storytelling ability and what I would like to maybe, you know, change the narration, that what if these images are federal images of a federal state, that somehow there was one government that shared the same images federally. In their own region, they could, you know, depict their own demigods or semi-gods or whatever. But at the federal level, they all have the same imagery, which are these two images that are prevalent in all these places in the American region. So that would be my push, would be, what if they had a federal government, something like a federal government, and these images are, you know, their stamp that they were all under one system, and through history something happened.
I think that's believable. Definitely.
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
And I never like thought about that itself. I was just saying maybe, you know, in terms of, you know, we all came from one group, and like when they split off, they would have a lot of the same ideas or like symbols, right? And that's why you find it all over the place. But that's a unique idea. I hadn't thought of that.
Well, like I said, how far can we push this? And I think we are able to do it because, you know, we are to not, I think, I don't know, maybe I'm getting too carried away. To not do it would be to admit that our culture, our identity is dead. You know, it would be similar to accepting that that was them back then and this is us now, and there's no connection in between. But to go something along these lines would be to say, why are we afraid to say that? We are them. There is no separation. This is us. It's the same consciousness in 2021. This is us. And if we are them, then we have all the authority to narrate our own view of who we are. Why are we why should we accept what is told of us? Why can we say this is who we are, as opposed to, you know, you have German archaeologists, you have French archaeologists, you have all these European archaeologists, even Russian archaeologists, they come, they do their little digging, and they do their little, and then they say, oh, this happened here and this happened there, and because they stepped onto, I don't know, Frankfurt University, that's the mainstream narration. Why do we have to do that? Why do we have to accept that? Why do we have to accept that, like, our own identity told onto us? Does that make sense?
Right. No, I agree. I think our own, like, indigenous people need to do their own investigations. And, like, I mean, some people might say that, oh, you guys are, like, sound like crazy, like, talk about these possibilities, these theories, but like, come on, they were on the freaking History Channel saying all this shit came from aliens. Like, that's fucking out there, and people believe that shit. You know, it's way more believable to say that, yes, we had some sort of connection across both continents, and that's why you find these similarities. That's way more believable than aliens did it, you know?
Yeah. And I would also say, I say these things not because I'm crazy, even though many people would say, like, what? One single government back then, but they had no writing. They had no wheel. Yeah, we heard all that. But like I said, I am a writer. I'm a storyteller, and I'm going to tell a story in this fashion. And why would I be afraid to narrate my own, my own story? I don't know.
I don't think you're crazy.
No, I don't think you're crazy either. I mean, like, it's like, the fact is, we don't know. We don't know what happened. Like, we were here thousands of years before Europeans ever showed up. We don't know everything that transpired, not even a fraction of it. So for somebody to say, oh, it didn't happen, like, that's really dismissive. You know, you don't know. You're not an authority to say it didn't happen. You have no idea.
Yeah. So. And I'm also very skeptical of, there are two prominent Peruvian authors called Huamán Poma de Ayala and Inca something. And they have two books. One is the Chronicles of the Inca Empire, and another one. And I don't know. I acknowledge that they exist, but I believe there's room to doubt that the accuracy of what they're relating.
I definitely think that there's room for skepticism. You know, I think there's a lot more research that needs to be done. And there's a lot of unknown components about our history that I think that we as Indigenous people should do ourselves and not rely on, these archaeologists from Europe to do it for us. I mean, this is our land. We should be doing the work ourselves. Nothing against them. I mean, they're curious people, but we should be doing our part.
Yeah, I mean, it's not to dismiss. I mean, obviously, these people had, stepped in, I don't know, Berlin University, Frankfurt University, these highly, noted universities. But I don't know, it just feels weird that, you would just complacently say, oh, okay, you're telling me, this is how my ancestry was.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
It just feels weird. It just doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem totally right.
Yeah.
But yeah, should we should move on to the question there?
Oh my God, I forgot about the question.
You're good, man. We'll give a little bit of time for the questions.
Okay, let me ask some questions and choose whichever one you want to answer and whichever one you want to skip. Before I do that, I want to give a really quick shout out to Rusbel Moyo, who is actually the inspiration. He's a YouTuber. He's a Peruvian Spanish-speaking YouTuber. So all his YouTube videos are in Spanish. He is the inspiration as to why I did something like what he does. He focuses more on language, on other cultural things, in images that he studies really in depth, and he has his own like theory. But maybe we can link up his YouTube channel at the bottom for any Spanish-speaking viewers out there that want to support him. He's from Peru. Please support him if you can. Subscribe to his channel. Maybe make him notice that we exist, because I try to contact him and he did not reply. Okay.
Definitely.
Question number 1 for both of you guys, whoever wants to answer. Do you think an indigenous thought of space and time, the physical world, can be as objective as that of Western thought?
I believe it can, because our ancestors were scientists. I mean, the Mayans came up with the number 0, right? They had their charts. They knew what eclipses were. You know, they knew what solar events were. I think there definitely can. In terms of philosophy, certainly. I mean, New Mauda's touched upon philosophers too, right? But yeah, because you find the same sort of frame of mind with space and time with other cultures in the world, other people. So definitely.
Okay. Second question. How can indigenous and mestizo populations unite?
Juancho, you want to take this one or have me do it?
Oh, we can both take it half and half if you want. You give your perspective if you want.
I think that it all starts from the early stages of our development. We are taught at early ages that we aren't native people. Simply the educators, those spreading this, I'll call it propaganda because that's what it is, that we aren't native because of culture. They look at it from a cultural perspective. I think they want us to assimilate into this so-called mestizo, European-based identity. And that will further erase us from our native connections. When you throw that in, along with like the media only praising white skinned actors, Spanish descendant actors, then that's a recipe for genetic disaster. It disconnects us further away from who we are. So I think it really starts in the beginning stages, like going in an entire different direction for indigenous learning, and making sure that we as indigenous people can find a way to come together. Like, we aren't different from one another. Yes, we do practice different cultures. That's correct. But racially, most of us are very much the same. So I think, and it has to be done. I mean, you see the racism, you see the destruction, the genocide of indigenous tribes. And I know if we can come together, we can put a stop, at least greatly reduce the damage that has been done. If we are able to form some sort of political organization or entity, we can do much more for our brothers and sisters. Again, we're in the early stages of this, and we'll always have those that criticize us and doubt us, but we mean, in all honesty, the wellness for all people, particularly the Native American and indigenous rural tribes, because we look out for them. I'll let Wanchaloa take whatever else he wants to add on to that.
Yeah, so I say yes. It goes back to the root issue. A lot of people criticize me, or me, Marcus, right? Or just our whole thought process, because they're like, well, there's racism with the traditional indigenous communities that are still around that retain their tribe. And so therefore, we as mestizos cannot assert an indigenous identity. We can't go back to that. And the thing is, people like that are only complaining about a symptom. They're not looking at the cause. What is the cause of that racism? What is the cause of all these problems? The cause is the whole concept of mestizaje, that you're separate because you're a little bit white or you're part white and therefore you're better. That's what causes this racism. You destroy mestizaje and we go back to no, we're all the same. We're indigenous peoples. We're in it together. I mean, we all respect our own nations, we're all separate in terms of that. Like we have our own tribal communities, or maybe you're detribalized, right? But you're not better because you're part white. You're not. That doesn't turn you into a unicorn. It doesn't turn you into this brand new animal like how the Europeans want to make it seem. It's like we establish that, take away the mestizaje, and the racism goes away. That's the issue. People will criticize and complain about the symptoms all day. You can treat the symptoms, but if you never cure the disease, it doesn't go away. So that's one. That's how I think you can unite us, just by destroying the whole concept of mestizaje, to where people aren't sitting there trying to say they're half breeds. I mean, that's where all this ill has come from, is that whole concept.
Yeah.
Really nice. If you were to push the idea of race of people, like our counterparts, white people and black people, what race would you say we would be?
So this is where it gets into the labels, and I'd like to get your perspective on it too more. But no one can really like get behind a single label, is what I've realized. So if we wanted to go with the race, everyone has complaints about every single little thing. One complaint is saying we're the indigenous race. So I get complaints because people say, well, again, you're erasing the culturally indigenous people, because to them, like, the word means something different to many people. When we say indigenous, we mean racially indigenous. Other people that cry and say we're not indigenous, when they hear indigenous, they mean like you're part of a tribal community, or you're ethnically indigenous, right? So there's that issue with the word indigenous. There seems to be a lot of infighting with that, just because people don't realize what the other person's even talking about half the time. People cry about Native American because they don't like the American part. People say, oh, well, I don't like just calling myself Native because you can be Native anywhere. But then you point out, well, you can be indigenous anywhere. So no one's happy with that. I've heard of Masawali, which is a Nawa word meaning indigenous person, which I think is a pretty good term to use. But I'm sure there'll be people crying because it's a Nawa word. So, I mean, there's that. American Indian literally means, like, if you go by the census definition, you go by even the dictionary definitions. American Indian means includes all the native people in North, South, Central America. But a lot, you'll probably have northern natives, complain if we use American Indian, because they think that it means only a political class here in the United States with the United States government. So they might complain if you use American Indian as far as the race. So it's just a huge issue with all that. The only solution I see in sight is by, I don't know, I personally think the whole indigenous thing, the wording of that, some people are going to complain and cry. So I would say, be very specific. So what do I mean by that? I mean, if you're going to say you're indigenous, you might want to add a qualifier. If you're not part of a tribal community, you might want to say I'm racially indigenous, or racially native, or whatever. So that's what I would say would be the best course. I favor Native American more than indigenous personally. That's me. The best words would probably be that of your nation, if you know what your nation is. So the best word for me is actually Guachichil. That's what I am. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard. I think people have tried for a long time to try to come up with a label that would encompass everybody, but that has not been established to this day.
Marcus?
For me, well, I was down with Maswali. Like, of course, not everyone's going to agree. Like, we are all of some race. We are the original, people. Our ancestors are here. But we'll always have the doubters that will say, no, we can't be this, that. The northern native looks way more different than the southern native. I'm like, oh, God, here we go.
Yeah, as much as like how a different Asian, like a Korean's going to look a little different from a Chinese person. That's how different it looks.
Yeah, so we'll just, I'm for Maswali. I'm for a term that is agreed upon by many tribes across the Americas. If we can at least get to that point, then I think we've made some headway. But right now, because I know like anyone can be indigenous, anyone can be, native in some respect. But I think that there should be a word that represents us that isn't like, European from like, it's European sounding, like a native indigenous. We should find a native word that represents us. Again, like as Wanchaloa said, we haven't gotten to that point yet, but when we do, I think we'll be in a better place. But
yeah, but we did want to see what you thought about that more, because like I'm sure, like after I explained the whole conundrum with the terms, I'm sure you've seen some of it yourself. What do you think?
I'm not sure if I'm using the right word. I'm going to plead the fifth on this question. It's very hot. It's very controversial. I have an idea. However, I would like to hold on to that for some time.
No worries.
No worries.
Let me ask the fifth question. Why does democracy seem to fail, or at least be challenging to maintain in Latin American countries?
I think that goes to the issue of corruption. You don't have and again, I'm not trying to be disparaging of Latin American countries, but it goes back to the corruption. You don't have that culture of integrity and honesty, right? Where all the powers are, respect each other, whatever different systems they have in said country, right? So I think it goes back to not having that backbone or that culture, and so there's a lot of corruption, and that's why the democracy fails, because it's not really a viable democracy, right? It's a charade.
Honestly, it also comes from colonialism as well. The Spanish, the administrators treated our lands and our people as nothing more as a stop and go for the most part. They come, steal resources, and leave. So that made these countries in really bad conditions, because when you make a majority of the host population, and you throw them into this caste system and throw them into encomiendas and all these other terrible situations, it's not going to have a good future, and you see that now. This is why I don't celebrate Peruvian independence. No offense, more Peruvian Independence Day, because when the independence came, does everyone think that like the Spanish elites all just like, well, I guess we'll go home? No, they stayed there. They stayed there and still ruled the land. The Audiencias and the Viceroy, were whatever they were called, essentially were still there, but in government forms. And then you had the race, the caste system essentially still stayed in place. Like you didn't see, it was still a mess after the independence. So, and indigenous people, in any sense, maybe even suffered more, because the governments did not care about those rural tribes. At least, the Spaniards were really terrible, but man, if you look at what the governments of like Paraguay and like all of the so-called Latin American governments are responsible for, it was really like freaking bad. So for there to be like, oh, independence was great, it's the genocide still happened. You still see like native countries having like these, rich, Criollo elites still in charge. And I am for equal representation, and that is not equal representation. We need people that care deeply for all people, including the rural indigenous tribes that exist in the Amazons and other areas. Like we can't have this like sort of sterilization BS that happens. This racism, it has to stop. That's why, again, like as I say, we started this channel because I'm not just going to freaking sit there. Like something needs to be done. And if this is the way that we have to go and we got to step on some toes, then we're going to step on some toes, by God.
I totally agree with you. And it's interesting that you say representation, because I believe that leads to the sixth question, which is, can an indigenous community rethink democracy?
I think we should move into a direction that, democracy. I don't feel that Western government styles were ever good for indigenous folks, for native people in general. I think we have to move into a completely different direction. Obviously, we don't want to move into some I don't know what y'all politicals or beliefs are, but I'm not for like communism or socialism. But I just think we need to move into a direction that is better suited for us. Maybe we can borrow like small pieces of each. It's difficult.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was going to say keeping our democratic values
Sure.
that we know and cherish of, because I'm a high advocate for democracy. However, in terms of representation is the thing, right? There's a lot of people in the Amazon region that they are not represented.
No.
And the people that they do choose, at least again in Peru, at least the people that they do choose, as soon as they get into the Congress, they're like my personal interests, and you're there, and I'm here with my personal interests, and they do very little legislation for like the people who actually chose them. So, but I would say, I mean, I wasn't trying to imply with the question, let's think of communism or anything like that. Keeping our democratic values that we love and cherish as Americans, can we switch it up a little bit so that it can representation for all the people in rural areas and in small communities?
Right, I think they can because I mean, at least the United States had that issue with the Southerners, and the northern states where like the southern ones had way less population, so they came up with the Senate as a response to that. Because the House of Representatives was based off population, so the northern states had way more power because of that. So I'm not saying they have to copy the U.S. model, but I'm saying just you can blend it. You can try to come up with something so it's more fair, so those that are like the indigenous communities have more representation and they can equal the power, right?
Yeah.
Even it out.
But you have to. I don't mean to sound like militaristic or anything, but the current heads of state aren't doing us any justice. Yes, I'm for democracy and all of that, but when you have people in charge that don't care about us or just being corrupt as hell, then we're not going to go very far. And look, I'm being very honest. Look where all the scientific innovation and technology come from. They come from countries that are very much, I'm not going to say corrupt free, but their systems are working because they have people in charge that care very deeply for the majority population. It really, I think, does come from who the head of state is. Now, I'm interested to see how the Pedro Castillo and his people that will work under him will go. I'm curious about that, but we'll just have to see.
Interesting. Let me ask you in relation to that. Which aspect of a failing democracy do you think is the most detrimental to native/indigenous communities or race of Americans?
It's a good question.
Remember, we can always skip.
Oh, I'll answer it. I mean, Juancholo, did you want to say anything, or I'll just go ahead?
You go ahead.
I think communism is pretty bad, in my opinion. It doesn't do anyone any good. I mean, people can disagree, but that's my opinion. I think democracy, like you said, is important. We should move into a democratic direction, but I think it should be in a direction that benefits the indigenous people and the native host population. If we are to reap the benefits of our hard work, again, it really starts from people that are inserted into these administrative roles. I mean, we obviously see the results of communism in China and, with the Soviet Union and whatnot as well. And we can see how that works. But again, I mean, there are other sides of China that they've managed to erase a lot of corruption. But again, I would say communism for me.
Which aspect, wait, sorry, let me retract that. Do you think that there is a slightest sense of derogatoriness in the word indigenous?
I would say so because, and this goes into the debate with the label, right? The whole, what does it mean? We say we mean it when we say it that we're that racially. Other people criticize and say, no, it's only this that means indigenous. They're seeing for indigenous, it's like you have to be living in a tribal community that lives in a very antique style fashion, right? And if you go beyond this box that the government has created, then you're no longer indigenous. So a lot of people use, and I've seen a lot of people, Mexicans use the word indigenous is kind of synonymous with poor, being low income, poverty, right? Uneducated. So yeah, I think there is some derogatoriness to it, but it's also constrained because of this system of thought where it's like you can't be indigenous unless you fit this one little experience in this one little box, and if you go beyond it, you're no longer indigenous. So if you're the president of Mexico, you can't be indigenous. If you're a senator, you can't be indigenous. You can't be indigenous if you're something very noteworthy or beyond the community, which I think is stupid.
That's really interesting. If we don't speak the language of our ancestors, as we know, there are many of them from Quechua. I know some Quechua words. I'm not a fluent Quechua speaker. Neither are my parents. And actually, many mestizos don't speak native languages as well. And even native people that grow up in the city, they don't speak their own language. Do you think that we fail to truly have a sense of real identity if we don't speak our languages?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you've got tons of adoptees from Central and South America that will likely never connect to their indigenous, whatever tribes it might have been, because we don't have many. We have zero. A lot of us have zero family documents, birth documents, to connect us with our family members. So unfortunately, a lot of us will be in this position for life. I know it sounds bad, but that's just the way it is. It's probably an example for me, most likely, as well. So no, and that's why I don't like. There's certain people out there, and I'll call them gatekeepers because that's what they try to be. They'd be like, no, you can't be native or indigenous, or indigenous native person, Native American person, because you don't have any connections to your tribe. I find that really, it's just stupid to say. And they try to do their best for indigenous tribes, which I understand, but I don't think they understand that there are many people out there that don't have any connections whatsoever. It's not even adoptees at this point. Like, this is like third, fourth generation, so-called Hispanics in the United States. But again, they have a better chance at maybe connecting to genealogists. But as for the adoptees such as myself, I just don't. I think it's really disingenuous to say that and be like that towards me and my fellow Native adoptees. Yeah, that's my. So that being said, I think that there's other ways we can connect without speaking the language, because again, it is hard for a lot of us to speak our original language because of a lot of lost documents. And, colonialism didn't help either, because the Spanish went bananas and destroyed a lot of things, a lot of libraries and whatnot, indigenous libraries and other things. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I would like to speak the Guachichil language, but unfortunately, we only have 400 to 500 words that we know of right now. The tribe's still trying to rescue more of the language at this stage. If we can, I'm going to learn it. It's to me, it's very important to learn it. Simply because it allows me, I guess, to reconnect a lot more to my ancestors. But language in and of itself is still only a tool. It doesn't make you inauthentic if you don't speak such a language. It'd be great if you can try to learn that, right? But it doesn't make you inauthentic. It's just a tool at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree with Wanchaloa.
That's really interesting. And finally, let me ask you this maybe controversial question. I don't know if I majored in English with an emphasis on linguistics, so I know a little bit of the history of English, and I know that English has gone through three different phases. There is Old English that doesn't sound anything like the English that we speak today. It actually sounds pretty foreign. It sounds like a different language. There's Middle English that sounds more Germanic than the English that we speak today. And then there's Modern English, the English that we do speak today. And the reason why I cite this is because to prove that that language does in fact change. So with that in mind, let me ask you, in countries where the mestizo and the native communities are the majority of the population of their country, do you think they could or they should advocate a change of language away from a language that uses words that tend to perpetrate this sort of marginalization of people? Could we do that? I mean, what I'm trying to say, it's been done before, maybe not through the same reasons, but the change of language does happen in history. Could we begin to change Spanish, for example? And the reason why I ask this is Spanish is consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel. English is consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant. So Spanish, it's really quite easy. You can start chopping down endings or like sections of the word to make it shorter. Could we advocate for that? Would that be a good idea?
I think it'd be a good idea, actually, long term. Where if like they're still intact languages, to maybe have the children educated in that first, and then Spanish is a second language, and so on. But modifying the language, I think, well, the language has already been being modified, Spanish, in terms of there's multiple like Nahua words and indigenous words, at least in Mexico, that have been added to Spanish that weren't there to begin with, because those words didn't exist in the Spanish language when the conquistadors arrived. They had to incorporate that into the language. So yeah, I think so.
I agree with Wanchola.
Yeah, it was really interesting when I majored in English to find out that development of English to the English that we speak today. And sometimes when you tell somebody about old English, they think, oh, when they used to say thy and thou, and I'm like, no, that's modern English. Old English didn't even, it sounds like a completely foreign language. So I thought that was interesting that changes in languages obviously happen, and if the majority of a country identifies in a certain way, they could probably instigate through legislative decrees, chopping down prefixes and suffixes from a language that takes. I don't know if you noticed, but Spanish has very little one vowel words. Usually it's 3, 4, 5 freaking vowels. And to say something really small in English, it takes a while to say it in Spanish. So what if we just start chopping down prefixes, That could also be another route. Yeah. But that's just an idea, Anyways, I'm done with my presentation. Thank you guys so much for the time.
Oh, thank you, Moore. We learned a lot today.
Yeah, thank you. I think our viewers are really going to like your video.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to putting this out for everyone to see more.
You get to enjoy the 1,000 subs.
Yeah, 1,000 subs. Well, and for those watching, please check out Moore's YouTube channel. We'll put the link in the description. And more followers, yeah, in the gram too.
Yeah, we'll pin those. We'll pin those in the comment section.
Yeah, but Moore, do you have anything else you wanted to add? Are you good? I'm
good. I feel like I expanded a lot on a lot of ideas. Yeah.
No, they're good ideas, man.
Okay, maybe the one thing. Again, I'm a storyteller. Okay, I'm a literature major / philosophy. So my ideas will be out there. And the things that I say are through imaginative storytelling. So please don't come at me with I don't know, information correcting me, and it can't be that and it can't be this. But all I'm saying is I majored in English. I like storytelling, and my imagination is wide. So I like to investigate and be inspired by those investigations to be able to tell a story. And that's it.
You're a good storyteller, my friend. I appreciated the presentation. As we said, we learned a lot. I love the questions. And, we'll definitely have to have you on again and another live sometime.
Yay. It would be my pleasure.
The pleasure is ours. But anyway, again, thank you, everyone that tuned in, is checking us out. To those subscribing, if you like the video, don't forget to like. But yeah, we will all see you next time. Wanchaloa, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, this is the most important thing I need to say out of this entire episode, okay? To the haters, we hate you too.
We definitely do. Yeah.
But in the words of the fabulous Nicki Minaj, keep hating because it keeps inspiring.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it does. That's true. But again, thank you again. And we will see you all another time. Bye.